Hey there, Letters Daily family. What time are you watching this video, and where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. Alright, let's dive right into today's letter and see what unfolds.
Life has a way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. For years, I thought I understood my family dynamics. We were, in many ways, an ordinary family, one that celebrated birthdays with cake and candles, gathered around the dinner table every night, and occasionally bickered over small things. But underneath that seemingly perfect facade, a secret was lurking, one that would unravel everything I believed about my parents' relationship. It all started innocently enough. My dad, who has always been the outdoorsy type, often escaped to the lakes and rivers near our home for fishing trips. Fishing was his sanctuary, his way to decompress from the stresses of life. At least, that's what we thought. These trips became so routine that we hardly noticed when he packed up his gear and left for the weekend. I always admired his dedication to the sport, and he had a special knack for bringing home impressive catches, at least, that's what he claimed. But last weekend, something felt different. My dad's excitement for his upcoming trip seemed a bit too intense, a bit too eager. It was the little things that tipped my mom off, the way he checked his phone repeatedly, the extra care he took in packing, the mysterious smile that played on his lips as he left the house. My mom is no stranger to intuition, and this time, it was screaming at her. For the first time in their marriage, she decided to follow him, a decision she later said she made almost instinctively, as if some unseen force was pushing her to uncover the truth. With her heart in her throat, she tailed him for miles, her mind racing with possibilities. Was he meeting with friends? Was he scouting out a new fishing spot? Or was there something more sinister at play? After about an hour on the road, her worst fears were confirmed. My dad didn't head to the usual lake or river. Instead, he pulled into the parking lot of a quaint little café, one of those places with a sign that creaks in the wind and a few weathered tables outside. My mom watched from a distance as a woman approached him, and they greeted each other with a familiarity that made her stomach drop. This woman wasn't just anyone, she was his high school sweetheart, someone we all thought was a relic of the past. My mom recognized her immediately from old photos, the ones my dad had once shown us with a laugh, saying how young and foolish he was back then. But there was no laughter now. My mom watched as they sat down at a table, their conversation punctuated with laughter and gentle touches. It was clear that this wasn't a chance meeting, this was something more deliberate, something planned. Unable to contain her emotions, my mom stormed out of the car and confronted them. The shock on my dad's face was undeniable, but it was nothing compared to the devastation on my mom's. She demanded to know what was going on, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. The cafe fell silent as the few patrons inside turned to watch the drama unfold. In that moment, my dad had no choice but to come clean. He admitted that he had been meeting with his high school sweetheart for months, rekindling an old romance that he claimed he never truly got over. He tried to justify it, saying that he felt trapped in his routine, that he needed to feel young again, that it was just a harmless escape. But there was nothing harmless about it. My mom's world came crashing down around her as she realized that the man she had loved and trusted for decades had been living a double life. The ride home was unbearable. My mom drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. My dad sat beside her, his head hung low, knowing that nothing he said could make up for what he had done. When they arrived home, my mom went straight to their bedroom, slamming the door behind her. My dad stayed in the living room, staring at the wall, the weight of his actions finally settling in. I was out with friends that day, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing back home. When I returned, the tension in the house was palpable. My mom's red-rimmed eyes and my dad's slumped posture told me everything I needed to know without a single word being spoken. I felt a mix of confusion and fear. What could possibly have happened to bring them to this state? Later that evening, my mom called me into the kitchen. She told me everything, her voice breaking as she recounted the day's events. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My dad, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had cheered me on at every school event, who had always been my rock, had betrayed our family in the worst possible way. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, my emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. Over the next few days, the house was filled with a heavy silence. My mom and dad barely spoke, and when they did, it was only in hushed, tense tones. My dad moved out temporarily, saying he needed some time to think. But I knew the real reason. My mom couldn't stand to be around him, and he couldn't bear the guilt of what he had done. I tried to go about my daily life, but it was impossible to focus on anything else. At school, I found myself zoning out in class, replaying the events in my mind over and over again. At home, I avoided my mom's gaze, knowing that any conversation we had would inevitably lead back to the betrayal. The once warm and welcoming atmosphere of our home had been replaced with a cold, suffocating tension. My mom tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks forming. She went through the motions, cooking dinner, doing laundry, maintaining some semblance of normalcy, but there was a distance in her eyes, a sadness that hadn't been there before. She confided in her friends, and I overheard bits and pieces of their conversations. They offered her support and advice, but nothing could ease the pain she was feeling. As for my dad, he called every day, trying to apologize, trying to explain himself. But my mom couldn't bring herself to pick up the phone. The fishing gear that once cluttered our garage now felt like a collection of lies, each rod and reel a reminder of the deception that had torn our family apart. I couldn't even look at it without feeling a wave of anger and resentment. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and marriage. My parents had always seemed like the perfect couple, the kind who would grow old together, who would support each other through thick and thin. But now, that image had been shattered. I wondered how long this affair had been going on, how many times my dad had lied to us, how many more secrets were hidden beneath the surface. Despite everything, there was a part of me that still loved my dad. I couldn't just erase all the good memories we had shared, all the times he had been there for me. But that love was now tainted with a deep sense of betrayal. I didn't know how to reconcile those conflicting emotions, how to move forward when the foundation of our family had been so thoroughly shaken. Weeks passed, and the situation didn't improve. My mom grew more withdrawn, and my dad's absence became more permanent. Friends and relatives started to notice the change, and soon the rumors began to spread. I could see the pity in their eyes, the whispers behind our backs. It was humiliating, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. Then one day, out of the blue, my dad showed up at the house. He was unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He asked to speak with my mom, and reluctantly, she agreed. They sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared countless family meals, and talked for hours. I stayed in my room, unable to bear the tension, but I could hear snippets of their conversation. My dad begged for forgiveness, swore that he had ended things with his high school sweetheart, and promised that he would do whatever it took to make things right. He spoke of his love for my mom, how he had lost sight of what really mattered, how he was willing to go to counseling, to change, to be the husband she deserved. But my mom was hesitant. The wound was still too fresh, the pain too raw. She told him that she needed time to think, that she couldn't just forgive and forget. It wasn't that simple. The trust that had been broken couldn't be easily repaired, and she wasn't sure if she was willing to try. After their conversation, my dad left, and the house fell silent once more. My mom retreated to her bedroom, and I didn't see her for the rest of the day. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but the words felt hollow. I didn't know if everything would be okay. I didn't know if our family could ever go back to the way it was. In the weeks that followed, my mom and dad continued to talk, but the distance between them remained. My dad was desperate to come home, to make amends, but my mom kept him at arm's length. She had been hurt too deeply, and she wasn't ready to let him back into her life. She told him that she needed more time, that she needed to figure out what she wanted. As for me, I was left grappling with my own emotions. I wanted to believe that my dad could change, that he could become the man he once was, but I wasn't sure if I could ever truly forgive him. The image of him with his high school sweetheart, laughing and holding hands, was burned into my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. One day, my mom sat me down and told me that she had made a decision. She said that she wasn't ready to give up on their marriage, but that things couldn't go back to the way they were. She wanted to try counseling, to see if they could rebuild what had been broken. But she also made it clear that if my dad ever betrayed her again, that would be the end. There would be no second chances. I was relieved, but also apprehensive. I wanted my parents to stay together, but I was scared of what the future held. Would counseling work? Could they really rebuild their relationship after such a betrayal? I didn't know, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on me. My dad moved back in a few weeks later, and they started attending counseling sessions. It wasn't easy. There were many arguments, many tears, and many moments when it seemed like they were on the brink of giving up. But slowly, they began to make progress. My dad was more open and honest than he had ever been before, and my mom started to let her guard down, little by little. It's been several months now, and while things aren't perfect, they're better than they were. My parents are still together, still working on their marriage, and I'm cautiously optimistic that they'll be okay. But the shadow of my dad's betrayal still lingers, and I don't know if it will ever fully disappear. As for me, I'm trying to move forward as well. I've learned a lot about love, trust, and forgiveness, but I'm still figuring out how to apply those lessons to my own life. The fishing gear is still in the garage, but it no longer holds the same weight it once did. It's just stuff, meaningless without the trust that once defined our family. I don't know what the future holds for my parents or for me, but I do know that we're all stronger than we were before. We've been through the worst, and we've come out on the other side, scarred but not broken. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.
If you enjoyed this letter and want more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for daily updates. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions and reactions. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.